Hello, people of the internet, this is Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir, and welcome to another episode of the Shuwatch podcast. Today on the show, I have an artist who I've known ever since I started attending G-Fest back in 2014. He's a long-standing member of Artist Alley and an all-around great guy. Welcome to the show, Mr. John Bellotti Jr. How are you, man?
Good, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure knowing you, and it's always a pleasure seeing you at G-Fest every year. You're actually one of many people that I truly enjoy seeing every year at the show and having conversations with. So thank you for having me on the show because we haven't seen each other in quite a while. So
it's been a while since I've seen you.
A little while.
Yeah. Honestly, without G-Fest, like G-Fest is like the one place where I get to meet a lot of my closest and dearest friends online, as well as just like a collection of like the most awesome people ever, especially within Artist Alley. And that was definitely the case back in 2014. My buddies Bill and Dylan, they were the guys who we went to G-Fest together, and they talked to you first, and then they told me, dude, you got to talk to this guy, John Bellotti Jr. He's like the coolest guy ever. And I was like, oh, wow, I guess I got to meet this guy now.
Oh.
Yeah, they're totally hyping you up, man. It's like, ever since then, it's like you as well. You're also like one of the highlights of the entire convention. And
thank you.
I've been meaning to get you on the show for a long time now. And I'm glad that, we finally had this opportunity to just sit here and chat for like an hour or two.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely down. And yeah, you came with a good group of guys. They're all really good people, and we'll talk about that more as we go into the podcast.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So, for those who may not be familiar with your body of work, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I mean, where to begin? I'm a Capricorn. I like beaches. No, I'm a New York resident. I work by day. I work as a scenic painter on a TV show called The Blacklist, and by night I am an illustrator. So I do commission work, which I'm doing a upcoming commission for you and your awesome comic.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm just finishing up a commission for another T-shirt commission for Last Bastion Studios, and they make original Sofubi toys. They're based out of California. Really great guys, and they want to do.
Are they? Are they the guys that are developing that indie kaiju game?
No, they have. It's called Ragnar. It's like a turtle with a cannon arm, and
okay.
Yeah, no, they got a really cool concept, and they sort of brought me on as their like T-shirt artist, which is really fun. Yeah, so I have that. I've done other commissions. I've done cover G-Fest. I've done comic conventions like New York Comic Con, MegaCon, 5 Point Festival. I just had 2 of my kaiju pieces sell at Clutter Gallery, which is the gallery that runs the 5 Points Festival, which is basically all designer toys and Sofubi and stuff like that. So, but I started doing Godzilla artwork. I've always been an artist, obviously, but I started doing Godzilla artwork when the 2014 movie came out, and sort of. I was always a Godzilla fan. I collected and stuff like that. But when that movie came out, I connected with people on Facebook that were Godzilla fans. I got into the Godzilla Collectors Group, Toho Kaiju Union, and I started doing Godzilla artwork for fun. And Ed Holland of Monster Attack Team asked me if he could print my artwork in his magazine. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. Sure. Like, first time posting this and someone approaches me about it. And Ed published the magazine. He sent it to me, had it on his website. He got me a gig with Famous Monsters, which is cool of him. And someone else that was in the fandom, well, I don't really speak to anymore, but at the time he said, you should do G-Fest. I said, really? He goes, yeah, you would do really well at that show. So I got some more artwork together. This was around 2015. And then I showed up at G-Fest, and I've always known about it, but I never went because I was like, what am I going to, I don't really want to go to that show. But I went there by myself. I drove out there. And I didn't know that Friday mornings were crazy in Artist Alley because the dealer's room was closed. And I remember getting there and sweating and being sort of nervous about my first convention that I haven't done a show since I was a kid. Oh. And I remember like all these people coming in, and I was just selling stuff like crazy while I was still setting up. And I learned a really important lesson that day was to get there like an hour ahead of time and get ready. So But I sold out of almost everything at that first show, and I said, "Wow, like that was really cool." But maybe it's just because it's Godzilla and it's a Godzilla convention. And then when I started doing other shows and selling really well at other shows, I knew I kind of was hitting upon something. And when I started getting approached to do like, commission work and stuff like that, people were asking me to do stuff for them. I said, okay, well, I clearly have something that people like. And, when I did New York Comic Con in 2019, which was like a pinnacle of my career, because I've always wanted to do that show, being a New Yorker, there was an artist sitting next to me who I really, really love and respect, and he's a professional comic artist, and I outsold him by like 10-1.
Oh, wow.
And jokingly, he said that to me. He goes, "You probably made, X amount of dollars." And I said, "Well, yeah, I did." He's like, "No, I saw it all weekend, man. People love your stuff, and it's really great." And I said, "Oh, thanks, man. I'm just, and I noticed that. And I'm like outselling these guys, and I'm just like a nobody. So I was like, okay, well, I clearly am onto something here." And, so my hobby has turned into something that I'm making money with, which is great. It's not enough money to, pay a New York City mortgage and car insurance, but it's nice to know that I'm getting some sort of compensation aside from my own, my own passion and my own desire to create new artwork daily. So it's giving me a focus of what to create. And, the goal is to eventually be like, Yuji Kaida or Art Adams or a Matt Frank and, make my living doing artwork that I love. So I guess that's the long version of who I am and what I do.
And it sounds like you've definitely accomplished a lot in the roughly like 5 years since you've entered the convention scene. And
I have. Yeah, I have, and I'm very grateful that I'm like the only artist to ever have a gallery showing at G-Fest in 2018. And guys like Bob Eggleton or Matt Frank, or even Yuji Kaida, like never had that opportunity. So I was very surprised and thankful for it.
Yeah.
That was definitely another highlight of my career. So, I'm appreciative of it, but I'm always looking for the next high to go to because it's just, it's just more mountains to climb.
You definitely don't want to like plateau or just like stay in like the same in like just have like a peak and then just kind of stop right there. Like as an artist, I'm sure you always want to like challenge yourself and as you said, reach the next level.
Of course, yeah. I even changed my technique too because I use Adobe Illustrator and a lot of people comment on that, like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you do this in Illustrator." And I say, I know I must really hate myself because the program wasn't designed to do the kind of artwork that I'm doing. And last year, I kind of changed my style more to almost like a painterly style in Illustrator. And people have been like really noticing that and like commenting on the style change. But I'm happy with it because it keeps things interesting for me to keep going with it. So I think as an artist, it's very important to continue growing and evolving.
Okay, then. And I guess, like, since we've talked so much about, like, your recent stuff, I wanted to go back to the very beginning. And I'm very interested to know what exactly got you into art and what was it that, like, made you want to become an artist in the first place?
That's a good question. I've answered it several times. I always think of, like, do I answer it the same or do I answer it differently? But it usually goes back to one of those things that every artist says where they've been drawing since they can remember. I probably picked up ones. And I was also fortunate that my grandmother was an artist who never pursued a career in art, and she had family that were artists. And my uncle was a big supporter of artists, and my parents were too, because my dad was a drummer. And my mom was like an artist type who never pursued it. So I was kind of surrounded by creative types, which I was lucky. So my dad would like get me colored pencils and they sent me to like a comic drawing class when I was a kid.
Oh, cool.
At a local institution. Yeah. So they always supported it. I've always drawn since I was a kid, and I've always loved Godzilla movies and Kung Fu movies and comic books and, all the really, fringe stuff, all the Japanese and Asian stuff I always loved. Like where my friends love Star Wars, I was into Godzilla. So I was always like the outcast or the weirdo.
Oh, I know. I think we all, us Godzilla fans, all know how that feels.
Oh yeah, totally. So that's just like my story, and I just sort of pursued it. And I've known at a young age I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to make my living in art. And I was going to be a comic book artist. I was really pursuing that like 100%. And then when 9/11 happened, I was in art school in the city in Manhattan at the time. And 9/11 happened. And
right.
that kind of changed my brain, my thought pattern a little bit, because I was really also interested in movie making and acting and stuff. And I also needed work because when I got out of college, I needed a job because I came from like a lower middle class background. My parents had money, but then my dad hit some hard times. So, I was really looking to make some money when I got out. And I found out about something called scenic painting for theater and film. And luckily I had a professor that used to do that at the union level. And she got me started on doing scenic painting in college. And right out of college, I got an internship at the Juilliard School as a scenic painter. So I did that for about 9 months. And then I started freelancing, doing stagehand work. I did a little acting. I did a little animation until I got into the union, the Scenic Paint Union in 2010. So I've been doing that as my day job for 10 years now, painting on like movies like Men in Black 3, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2.
Nice.
America's Got Talent, just to name like the big ones that I did.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, like, what is scenic painting, by the way?
I know it's I know a lot of people don't understand what it is, and that's cool. But well, first you get paid very well, and you get pension, and you get health insurance, all those good things. So scenic painting is, they build a set, right? Everyone knows that they make sets for movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they build it out of wood and and screws and staples, and we go in and we make it look like like
a city backdrop.
No, there used to be a lot of backdrop painting. That used to be what a lot of painting was. But picture your apartment, and that's what we turned that into. Like we do plaster work, we do painting. Like straight like contractor type painting, like painting the walls whatever color they have to go. For example, tomorrow we're doing a scene in Central Park on our TV show, and there's a bench that we have to sculpt out of foam to look like a concrete bench.
Oh, okay. So you're painting it to look like materials that it's actually not made out of.
Yeah, and like we have like this big FBI hallway we have to do, so it has to look like poured concrete. So it's a lot of like, you mix like concrete powder with plaster powder, and you trowel it on, and you make it look
okay.
A lot of fabrication of different textures and environments. It's a lot of fun, and I'm really trying to think of other stuff that, like faux finishing. That's another big thing that we do. Vinyl application, wallpapering, making things look dirty and ugly and shitty, which is my personal favorite thing to do.
Okay.
So it's really cool and really creative. So I'm very lucky that I have a very creative career in film and TV, and then I do my Godzilla stuff. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I know several artists who are unable for one reason or another to do art as a full-time job, and so a lot of them would often have like a day job that's like outside of the art field. But for you, you're one of the few people that I know who does it like full-time, both for as a full-time job and also on the side as a hobby. And so like being able to work on movie and TV sets sounds like an amazing opportunity that I'm sure plenty of people would love to experience.
Yeah, no, I had no plan B when I was growing up. I never said I was going to be a waiter and do my art. Like I never wanted to be that artist. I wanted to be a working artist, whether that was doing what I do and this stuff I do on the side. Like the goal is for that to be the full-time thing. So to have that also make money, it's like, oh my God, this is crazy. If I could just make more of it, and hopefully grow bigger, then I would definitely do that full time. But yeah, that was always the goal. Like I was just like, it's either art or nothing else. Whatever art form that takes, and it's something. Whatever I put my mind to is what I do. So whatever I focus on, like I can make it happen. And chose film and TV, and I made it happen. And luckily, I live in New York City, and thankfully, they have a union. And on top of the union, because they have scenic painters in California, where you're from, they have Georgia now. I mean, they have them all over the world. But in New York, we make the best rate because we do everything. Whereas in California, there's just people that plaster. There's just people that do painting. There's just people that do faux finishing. Where in New York, we do all of that.
Okay.
So it tends to be higher. So we work with a lot of people that are from Russia or out of state, like from Boston, Pennsylvania, because the money's so good for it. So I was very lucky to be able to pursue this in the city where it's sort of like, the top of the top, top of the heap in terms of pursuing it as a career. So, and that was just pure luck from my parents, just deciding that, they're from New York and just deciding to stay here. So, so I'm very, very fortunate, very fortunate.
Cool. So, I was just about to ask that about like the amount of career opportunities for film and television in New York, because I was always under the impression that like the majority of that kind of stuff usually takes place. A lot of like the filming and sets and all that kind of stuff usually takes place in either California or up in Canada. I believe like around like Toronto or something.
Right, and it does. I mean, Vancouver's another big hub.
Vancouver, yeah.
But New York, there's this thing now with all these productions. They have the local governments give tax incentives for productions to come to their state. So we've had the film tax program, I want to say since like 2005 or 6, and every year it just gets more and more and more busier, or just with so much work. So I've been very fortunate to have been on the same job for like 6 or 7 years now. So it's been really good. No, it's been a really good run so far. Hopefully it continues for a long time for everybody that works in the industry.
And are you still considered a freelance artist, or are you working with like a team of people that do all the scenic stuff together as a group?
I have a crew now. I have a whole crew that works for me, and we all get it done together. And but at the end of the day, where I can get fired, and because I'm considered, we're all expendable. There's no such thing as like a permanent job in the film business. Hopefully, but so when people get laid off, it's like devastating. But for me, it's like, oh yeah, I get laid off every once in a while. It's okay. I'm kind of used to it by now.
Just like getting back on your feet and looking for the next gig, I guess.
Yeah, you just go and you look for the next gig. But for other people, I guess it's it's a different kind of world. I'm working in a corporate world where you get laid off, and sometimes it's years before you find something else.
True, so, yeah.
What else? It's like one phone call the day you get laid off, and you could jump onto another job, and it's that easy.
So in the roughly 10 years that you've done scenic painting, what have been some of your highlights among all the film and television projects that you've worked on?
Just doing, I guess the highlights are like working on something with some good people and going home at the end of the day knowing that you did some really cool stuff. And that's been a lot of this job I'm currently on. It's just like, you get your hands dirty and everyone loves it. The designer, the art director, the actors, and you get thank yous and just stuff like that is whether it's like some shitty, like rusted boat that we did one time and it looked fantastic and everybody went crazy over it. And you just, it's
fantastically shitty.
Yes, 100%. It's a very fulfilling career because it's, when you work with your hands, it's very tangible and you feel like you created something and you feel fulfilled because you went home knowing that you created something with your hands today. So all the days kind of blend into one in that respect, I would say.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
And I also want to ask, is like, given the current state of things with the pandemic, has that affected the way you've been able to do your job in any way?
Oh my God, yeah. It's we get tested every week. We get tested every Monday.
Wow.
If people test positive, they're let off the production for 2 weeks, but they get paid. There's, our job used to do a lot of location work. Now it's a lot more set work, which is more stress on us. They moved our carpentry shop outside of our stages. So now we're a little bit more split up. It's made it a lot harder. we can't go on set like we used to. We have to get approval. It's, COVID supervisors. And, every day we show up to work now, it's like, well, how close are we to getting shut down again? Like once all the hospitals fill up again in New York,
yeah,
it's game over for all of us again, because that's what happened originally. They shut the whole industry down.
Right.
Or if, there's been jobs in New York where people show up and like 8 people test positive and they shut the job down for 2 weeks and retest everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of issues like that have been popping up, but it's definitely like I try to look at it as like everybody right now is suffering in some way with their job because of COVID. Unless you've been working from home the entire time before COVID, it's affected everybody. So I try to keep an open perspective that it's not just us, it's sort of everyone at this point.
I see that. And like, cause I've definitely been trying to pay attention to what's been going on over in Hollywood. Given that like a lot of projects have been put on halt, and that things are very unclear as to like the future of entertainment and where all of that is going to be going. And I kept thinking in the back of my mind that when it comes to like large scale productions, it might take a while for giant productions with like hundreds of crew members. I feel like that's going to be a thing that's going to be kind of impossible to pull off with the current state of things. And so with everyone trying to maintain social distance, I was very curious to know how that, if any of that has been an issue for you in your neck of the woods.
No, it definitely has. And I know those films that were shooting in the United Kingdom, like Jurassic World and Batman, they shut down a few times because of positive cases. And for us, like I said, like we have to wear a mask every day. And if you're shooting with the filming crew, the shoot crew, I think they get tested like 4 times a week.
Right.
And we don't have a production bubble like Tyler Perry does. Tyler Perry has like his compound and everyone lives there and no one leaves,
right.
Kind of like what the NBA is doing. But for us, we don't have that. So, they're operating under the good graces that everybody's being responsible.
Right. But that's because everyone is exposed to the elements, essentially.
Exactly. And I know that in California with how many cases they have, all the productions were, every December we have like 2 to 3 weeks off for the holidays. And all the productions in California were told by the health department that they strongly suggested that they pause their return from the holiday break because of how bad the caseload is out there. So I'm not sure if any of them went back to work yet. But last I heard is that a lot of them still haven't resumed production yet. So that's what I'm saying. If New York, New York has been getting a record number of cases, but the hospitalizations haven't been as bad as it was last spring, where we were like, almost had 20,000 people in the hospital. But if that happens again, there's no way anything's going to be open. So we're all just like, all right, like, we'll just keep showing up every day until they say, there's too many people hospitalized and we have to shut down again.
I see then. And I guess like before we move on from this subject, I'm very curious to know what are like, with the way things are going right now, do you see things eventually returning to normal, or do you think things are going to have to like in terms of like film and television production, they're just going to have to find we're unable to go back to the norm, but rather come up with a whole new means of doing things now?
I think it's best to follow the science and the virus itself, because the virus is sort of dictating where things are going. And if the health experts, they're like, this thing is going to be with us probably until the end of time. It may not be as powerful, kind of like the 1918 flu is still active, but it's just not as strong as it was. It's going to be a long time before things go back to normal, I think. They're spending the money to try to keep us safe, but like I said, it really depends on the virus and the trajectory. But until it clears up, until people are vaccinated, it's going to be like this, I think, for at least another few years. I don't think there's going to be a normal for a while.
I see then. Yeah, I've definitely been very curious about this. And, with you being someone who has been essentially has experience like with not in so much insider, but you're someone with knowledge and experience working on the inside. I definitely am very appreciative of your input on all of this.
Oh, of course. I mean, we talk about it every day at work. We're all just like, this is a joke. This is ridiculous. Like, what are we doing here? Because, we're not essential. And like I said, we have to make a living, but it's like we're showing up every day and dealing with now this extra stress of trying to do stuff in a shorter span or, with what they want to do. And it's like, all right, we're doing this and it better be worth it. So, it's a little, it went from being like a job that you enjoy to now a job that's becoming more of a headache than it ever was because of the virus. Right. So there were moments where I caught myself just wishing that it would just go back to how it was, because it was crazy before it hit. Now it's even crazier.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like things were progressing within the entertainment industry in a particular direction and then came to like a crashing halt, and now everyone's kind of like scrambling to figure out what's the next step. What are we going to do now?
Right. And my uneducated guess is that with how they shot The Mandalorian is kind of how things are going to progress once that technology becomes more readily available, like anything else. I don't think it'll put us out of work, because they've been saying scenic artists were going to be out of work 20, 30 years ago. And here we are working more than we ever have. But I think they might sort of go that route because it'll save them from having to go to a location when they could just put it on a giant LCD screen, as opposed to like having to get permits and film outdoors. But time will tell. The technology will always evolve and change and get more accessible for people to use.
Yeah. And I've also been hearing rumors that potentially animation might be on the rise again, because it's a medium, it's a type of entertainment that can be produced while safely performing social distance. What do you think about that?
I've heard about that. I definitely heard about that, and I think that why not, right? Because you can make that, you can make it happen, and why not do that? And I've also heard that a lot of special effects houses have been getting busier. Like they never stopped. They never shut down special effects departments, because they just kept going, and editing departments, like they just kept going. And those are the jobs you can really do at home. And it's like, now you can't have a crowd scene anymore, but they'll digitally put a crowd in there. So that puts more special effects departments now.
Right.
I don't know how our show is doing it, because I don't really watch our show, but I know they, like I said, they test everyone and they have contact tracers, and that's how they're going about it. But I don't know. It's just so experimental, honestly. Like there's that saying they're building the plane while they're flying it.
Yeah.
How they've described Hollywood, and that's just sort of what they're doing. So however they can make it work and still make money, they'll figure it out. They're very resilient. I'll give them that. I got a lot of respect for how resilient the business can be.
So like when you mention that, like trying to fly a plane while they're building it, it kind of reminds me of just that Bill O'Reilly quote, "Fuck it, we'll do it live."
Pretty much. Yeah. It's like, fuck it, we'll do it to camera, or we'll,
yeah,
we'll change it when we get there. That's pretty much how it's run.
Right. And I guess like speaking of like working from home, I guess this would be a good enough, nice enough transition to talk about the other side of the type of artwork that you've done, and that is like a lot of the stuff that you've done for commissions and posters and all that kind of stuff. So when like everything involving Robo 7, how did you get Robo 7 off the ground?
That's a good question. I think when I was starting out, and way back when in 2015, I always liked the idea of having an art name, because when I see like artists that's like the art of John Bellotti Jr., it just reminds me of like bad airbrush artists from the 80s or something that I would see in like local flea markets, and I was like, it's just so much more fun to have like an art moniker, like a Banksy or something.
Yeah.
Not that I'm in his league, but I said, what's like a fun name that I could use? And I love the Giant Robo anime. It's like my favorite anime of all time.
Dude, you're speaking my language there, man.
Oh yeah, I had the VHS in the 90s, man.
Oh, really? Wow.
Manga video. Yeah, I bought it at Suncoast in Fort Myers, Florida.
I remember Suncoasts.
I remember waiting like years for that last OVA to come out.
Right, because like, what was it? Episode 7 like got delayed by like a year or two.
I think it was longer because I remember just waiting and finally buying it, a bootleg of it in Chinatown. Now I have the DVD collection. To me, it's like one of the greatest superhero animations.
Oh, fuck yeah!
Ever. I know we weren't even trying to be superheroes, but it's just everything in it.
Oh yeah, it's like the culmination of it's just like anime the movie. You got giant robots, ninjas, samurais, cyborgs, like martial arts, just like every single genre. Like it's like it also just like it also helps that it's like one gigantic love letter to Mitsutaro Yokoyama's entire library of manga work. So rather than just being like a direct adaptation of Giant Robo, it's just like here's Daisuke and Giant Robo, and then everyone else from all these other mangas that he wrote.
Yeah, pretty much. So I took Robo 7, and one of my favorite characters of all time is Ultra 7.
Right.
So I just combined both of those names, and I came up with Robo 7, and I came up with like a logo. And I recently had John Ruffin of MyKaiju.com, the legend himself. He is also a brilliant graphic designer, and I approached him about redesigning my logo and my website for me. So he very nicely did that for me. So I have a new logo now that John designed, which is really, really great stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's pretty much it. There's nothing more. There was no like, lightning storm, and I was up all night trying to like figure out what to do, and the rain in the window. No, it was just
then a giant robot with a 7 on his chest broke through your window. That's it, Father. I shall become Robo 7.
Pretty much, yeah. I shall become a giant Robo 7. No, it was nothing like that. Again, it was just I took two things I really liked and mashed them together and it turned into something. So that's the origin of Robo 7.
Yeah. That's kind of like how I put my moniker together as well. It's like, well, I love kaiju films and I love film noir, kaiju noir. There you go.
There you go. Yeah, it's that simple.
Mm-hmm. So you said 2015 was your first time selling art at an artist alley at G-Fest?
That is correct. G-Fest was my first convention as a artist alley member anywhere.
Okay, I thought, you know what? I thought it was 2014 where we met you, where my friends and I met you, but I guess that was like the very next year. I guess it was 2015 then.
Yeah.
Okay. So with 2015, so you mentioned that was your very first convention, and so what was the experience like of selling art for the very first time as a member of an artist alley?
Well, I didn't know what G-Fest was about. I always knew of it because I used to read G-Fan, but I didn't know that Artist Alley opened 2 hours before the dealer's room, and that's when I had the most business. So I learned a valuable lesson that day was to always show up much earlier than the opening of the show, because as I was still setting up for the show, we got swamped and people were just buying my work like crazy. And as I'm trying to set up, and I'm just sweating and overwhelmed and trying to hold the line and maintain order at my table. But I got there, I drove there from New York, it was like 17 hours. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Because a few friends of mine on social media were like, you should go to do G-Fest because you would do well there. So, by the time they said that to me from 2014 to 15, I had enough artwork. I said, all right, well, let me go take a shot at it. And I ended up selling out like 90% of my inventory and home with all this money. And I said, wow, that's pretty cool. That's wow. Like, people want to buy my work. Like I'd never, I had my day job and I kind of did the other stuff on the side for fun. Like I've done like local shows in New York, but not with Godzilla stuff, with like pinup girls and like Marvel stuff. And I make like $50, $100 maybe, but this was like walking out over, not to get into numbers, but it was definitely worth the trip, and it more than paid for itself, like 3 times over. And
Nice.
yeah, and then I did a show after that in New Jersey, and I totally bombed. And I was like, this is terrible. Like, why am I doing this? Maybe it's just a G Fest thing. And a friend of mine in Orlando said, come down here, you could stay with me, and we could do the show called MegaCon.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, and I did really well at that show. And I said, okay, well, maybe I do have something. And every year that I've been doing it, I've done more shows, and I've done bigger and bigger shows.
Mm-hmm.
Every year that I've done it, I've like doubled what I've made the year before. So I was like, wow, like this is turning into like a career. Like I'm making money, and I'm making more money this year than I did the last year and the year before that. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then COVID hit. My convention run, but that's how it started. That's how I got started. And what helped me too was I would do a new piece of artwork, I'd watermark it, and I would just blast it all over Facebook. I wasn't big on Instagram until my wife got me into Instagram. Like I want to say like 2 or 3 years ago, but I would just go into all those Godzilla pages and just say, hey, my name is Sean, and I did this Godzilla art. I hope you like it. So when I would do conventions, people would say, oh, I've seen your work on this website. Like Art Adams, I went up to him and I showed him my work. He's like, oh, yeah, I've seen this online. I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. Like Art Adams saw my work. I guess I get it. So, but I've stepped off the pedal a little bit with Facebook, and I put more focus on Instagram and Twitter. That's been working out pretty well for me so far.
At any point, did you ever try DeviantArt? Because I know like artists these days don't really seem to use DeviantArt as much as they did in the 2000s and 2010s. But did you ever use it? Did you ever use it at any point in your career?
I still have it, and I still upload new stuff whenever I finish it just to have it. But DeviantArt is like YouTube. It's got so big, and artists just get lost on there. And I've had more opportunities through like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook than anything on DeviantArt. But I've never really found much success. But I know that's how like Matt Frank got his start and got noticed. I've never reaped any benefits from DeviantArt, even though I do have it.
It's kind of interesting how, despite Instagram being more limiting in terms of like the aspect ratio and how you're able to present your art, despite its limitations, it's proven far more valuable for artists these days when it comes to social media. Yeah,
it's very true. I think it's just no bullshit. It's just artwork, It's just photo.
It's stripped down. It's basic. It's straightforward, to the point. It's like you said, it's art. It's like, here you go. Do you like it? Comment it, share it, whatever.
Yeah, there's no political overtones. There's no political post. There's, the Facebook is just like, it's become like a topic.
or like Twitter, where it's just become one gigantic shouting match between a million individuals who has to get their opinion out there.
Yeah. But what I found with Twitter, like I've been connecting with so many professional illustrators on Twitter more than any other platform.
Okay.
So I keep Twitter, and I make sure my feed is a lot of artists and artwork. And, I've discovered like a book company that does licensed art, movie book. Movie poster books? Like I just submitted for their Halloween book and their Aliens.
Nice.
So if it gets in and it becomes an officially licensed poster that I can sell on my own. So fingers crossed that hopefully they get in, and I'll have like official artwork for once, with like an official company.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So when going back to when you were starting conventions, when and how did you come to develop your signature style of prints and pinups? Like, you definitely have like a very distinctive style where it's like when you make these posters of certain kaiju movies or like sci-fi or Asian cinema, you have like I guess we would call like a collage of various characters from the films that you would replicate in your style with vivid, bright, neon colors. When and how did you develop that style? And was it a style that you made leading up to your first G-Fest appearance? Or was it something that you've always had with you that you decided to just use it for G-Fest?
I always think about that because my colors have gotten more psychotic over the years, but I've always been attracted to color, and I've always been told I'm good with color.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always looked at a lot of kaiju art, and it tends to be dark and muddy. And I said, I'm not going to do that because I like color.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it was a little bit self-serving because I was doing these conventions, and I said, I really want people to notice my work.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just write yellows and reds and blues and greens and all different colors. And people were like, oh my God, your colors are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sort of became like a fun thing that I was doing. And like I said, there's so much kaiju artwork that's so dark, and no disrespect to any of those artists because I love it too, but I, like how I wasn't trying to do it to stand out from the crowd. It's just, I've always loved colors. And there's a Japanese artist, he goes by the name of Three Eyes Takahashi, and he's the same program that I do, and it looks like his screen is just melting with anime and colors, and something happens in my chest that I want to like explode when I see it, and I'm like, that's so inspirational. I've always tried to sort of emulate that. Or what's his name? Who is the big Japanese artist that everyone loves? He always has these crazy exhibits. Not, oh my God, why can't I think of his name? Not Mike. Oh God, he just did something for Godzilla. He did something for Evangelion. He does these giant, colorful anime style pieces. Murakami. He's like another guy that's like, I love his colors, and I've always loved movie posters and like guys like Drew Struzan.
Yeah, you know what? I was gonna say that your a lot of your posters have like a very like Struzan, like in terms of like the what's the word? The in terms, not the arrangement. There's another word for arrangement, but in terms
composition.
Thank you very much. In terms of composition, it reminds me the most of like Drew Struzan movie posters.
Yeah, some guy at MegaCon said, "Oh, you're the Drew Struzan of." No, it was the artist James Groman, creator of King Corpse, who's a buddy of mine. He came out there in New York Comic Con. He's like, "Yo, man, you're like the Drew Struzan Godzilla artist." I'm like, "Oh man, stop!" But so color and composition color, composition, and line work have always been the three things that have interested me the most as an artist.
Yeah.
So that's why my work looks the way it does, because those are the three things I enjoy the most. And with movie posters, you could really have a great time composing the characters and balancing your composition with, I'm going to make Mechagodzilla a little bit bigger than Titanosaurus and Godzilla a little smaller, and to really show like the hierarchy of the kaiju in this movie. Like these are the things I think of, like when I create one of these posters.
Okay.
So yeah, so like Space Godzilla, he's basically the whole background, and it's just Godzilla and Mogera and Little Godzilla in the front as like one unit, and Space Godzilla is like towering above all of them. These are things thoughts that I put into it. So, and people see it and they're like, wow, you really love this stuff. I could tell from your artwork. And I'm like, yes, I do love this stuff. And I put it all out there. I don't hold anything back. I'm also a big fan of Alphonse Mucha, who is a super famous, legendary Art Nouveau artist from late 1800s, early 1900s. And every comic artist, every poster artist has emulated Mucha in some way. So I'm a huge student of his work. And I've also recently loved Noriyoshi Arai's posters. He did all the Heisei. Yeah, his stuff is like, he's like the Norman Rockwell of Japanese poster artists. I mean, he's one of many talented Japanese artists, but his stuff is like, it's not screen accurate, but it's so good that I don't even care. Like his stuff is just powerful. So he's been like one of my biggest influences recently, actually, the last few years. So I try to emulate him as well. But that's sort of where my style was born from, which is all these different things together, really.
And among your various pieces, which have been like the ones that you feel like the most proud of? Godzilla
vs. Megalon, Shin Godzilla, Enter the Dragon, which I did recently.
Yeah. And in fact, like, I just wanted to mention it to you, like, I unfortunately never grew up that much with martial arts films. But like last year, my buddy Dylan, he introduced me to Enter the Dragon. He introduced me to Bruce Lee films starting with Enter the Dragon when we covered it on my YouTube channel last year for a review.
That's awesome. So yeah, those are in my Mad Max Fury Road, which was something I've been wanting to do for a long time.
Yeah.
My Destroyer poster, Terror Mechagodzilla. There's a few that like I look at, like my Monster Zero, and I know people love it, but there's like things I would change about it that still don't sit right with me.
Mm-hmm.
But like in terms of like the perfect compositions, I always go back to Destroyer, Mechagodzilla, Terror Mechagodzilla, Megalon, Shin Godzilla, 54.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those to me are like I nailed it. The other ones are still like, oh man, I wish I added that. Or like my new Hedorah poster, I'm really proud of.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so those are like the ones that like I enjoy looking at the most. Because the rest is like, oh man, like why did I make that choice, or why couldn't I find? You know, I like to work in photos. I'm like, why couldn't I find a better photo? And sometimes I can only use what's like right in front of me. And so,
and I know that like recently you're in the middle of working on an Ultraman poster, right?
Yes, actually, my Ultra 7 is one of my favorites too, and I'm doing an Ultraman poster which has, I want to say, like 19 kaiju on it, which is
the
most kaiju I've drawn outside of Final Wars and Ultra 7. I think Final Wars was like 13 monsters, and I think Ultra 7 was like 15 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So when I decided to do Ultraman, everyone always said you should do an Ultraman, and I said, if I can come up with something. So when I started looking at all the kaiju, I'm like, oh, I got to put Baltan in it, and Red King,
and
Milla, and Mephiles, and it just like the list kept growing and growing. I'm like, I got to put all these monsters in because they're so iconic.
Oh, definitely, yeah. A lot of those monsters still appear in the franchise to this very day in a lot of the newer series.
Oh yeah, 100%. So that's my newest one.
Is there any, since you've worked on a number of Ultra monsters and aliens, do you find any difference in terms of drawing or depicting Toho monsters as opposed in comparison to Tsuburaya monsters?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was thinking about it today because I posted an illustration I did of Juras, who's in my paper. And Juras took me a longer time because it was a Godzilla suit, and a Godzilla suit that was made for a movie, so the budget was higher. They had more time to make it. There's more detail in it, as opposed to like drawing Mephiles, who is just like flat surfaces, or like right now I'm doing Gamora, and there's not a lot of. I noticed that with Ultra 7, like I'm flying through these kaiju drawings because there's not much detail in them, and that is the limitation of shooting for TV with a smaller budget.
Right.
I think if I was drawing something for like the Heisei Ultraman, like let's say an Ultraman Tiga or Gaia kaiju, it would take me a lot longer because you could see that the kaiju designs got a lot more elaborate and intricate.
Oh yeah. They definitely, like, the technology was able to catch up to them, but for TV standards, and they were able to make more complex designs within the same amount of time.
Yeah. But no, there definitely is like a huge difference. Like when I drew like Ella King, for example, compared to like Hedorah, I mean, it's just like worlds apart. And like I said, it's just the limitation of making a kaiju suit for TV as opposed to film. That's really all it is.
And have you ever, like, in any of your pinups and posters, have you ever taken any like artistic license in terms of like the depictions of these monsters and human characters?
No, I'm very much a traditionalist, and I'm really, really into screen accuracy. And to sort of go back to the start of why I did this was I saw this really great Godzilla versus Hedorah poster for sale on a really popular anime merchandise website, which I won't name because I love the owner a lot.
Sure.
But I was, I asked how much it cost, and the guy gave me a price, and I said, that's a little too expensive for what that is. And I said, I'm just going to make my own poster that looks like the film that I would want to hang up on my wall. And that's when I did my first poster, which was Godzilla versus Hedorah. And that's when it got published and all this stuff. But I wanted it to look, because if you look at some of the original Godzilla posters, they made it before the film came out. So you had like the 62 Godzilla on the Mothra poster because they made it before the film was released. I wasn't crazy about that. So I said to myself, I want to make the posters I wanted to make the posters that I wanted to see them make for these original Showa films and then the Heisei era and the Millennium era. And that's sort of why I started doing it. So when I do my posters, I'm super screen accurate because I'm trying to make something that can be like an official poster that represents what's on screen.
Right.
There is something to be said for doing, interpretations of it. Like Matt Frank has his style. Bill Couture has his style. Nick Sheff certainly has his own style. Dope Pope has his own interpretive style. And that's great. Like everyone does their own thing. My thing is just being as accurate to the source material as it could be. So that's my approach on all of it.
Right. Kind of similar, I guess you could say, to like Bob Eggleton, when he would make these very like detailed, realistic looking, like screen accurate depictions of these characters.
Right. Yeah. Bob is a good example of that. Definitely.
Cool. And I noticed that you rely a lot on taking screenshots and being able to replicate them to a stunning degree. So, I'm just curious, have you ever done any art of these characters in like as screen accurate as possible, but in like, I guess, original poses, for lack of a better term?
I never did. I just really enjoy drawing from photos and models and stuff. I mean, I just did this funny little Pigmon sketch on a notebook that I posted on my social media, which was really goofy. And, it's funny because like you do something like that in 2 seconds, and not that it happened to me, but it could blow up and become like your thing. And you get hired, just drawing that style. But something that I take like 3 to 4 months to do, it's just like, yeah, people like it, but, it's just always like the thing that artists talk about, where it's like, oh, yeah, this thing I spent all this time on didn't get noticed. But, this thing I did 2 seconds on got noticed. So, I just don't have a desire for it because the stuff that I do takes so long that unless I'm like home for another 6 months like I was last year, I probably won't do it. And even then, I wasn't really doing it, so to speak.
Yeah, totally understandable there. And so when it comes to the actual process of making art, how much time does it usually take to complete on average a lot of your posters or a lot of your pieces?
It depends. When I'm working, because I work 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes. I'll come home and I spend like an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours a day on my artwork. So when I was home, like for example, my Godzilla vs. Hedorah poster, it took me like a good 6 hours figuring out that composition. And what I do is I take all my photo reference and I cut it out in Photoshop and I piece together the poster composition with photographs rather than doing it. And this way, I could just draw exactly what the composition looks like. I don't have to think about it. I know what it's going to look like in the end because I have it all worked out already. So, like my Godzilla vs. Hedorah, I want to say it took me like 2 weeks to do. That's because I was home. But when I'm not at home and I'm working, it could take a couple months. Like Ultraman, I started drawing, I want to say in late mid-November to December. I started drawing that and I'm almost done now. I have one and a half more kaiju and Ultraman himself, who's already drawn out. So yeah, when I'm working, it could be anywhere between 1 month and 3 months. I just did an Aliens poster for a book submission. I think I did that in like a month or something, maybe a little bit less.
Cool.
But now that I have like more weekend time available because of COVID, it's going a lot faster than it usually does. So yeah, like the sweet spot is like one to 2, maybe 3 months, depending on how intricate it is, really.
That's really cool. And recently you mentioned that you were taking commissions around this time, right? Currently?
I do take commissions, yeah.
Awesome, then. And I'd be very happy to see what other stuff that people would like to ask from you. And with all this like free newly acquired free time, I can't wait to see what sort of stuff that people would ask you for in the future.
I'm down. Like, bring it. Like, whatever you got. You know, if it speaks to me and it looks like my style works for you, like, reach out to me. Like, I'm dying to do anything. You know, anything that I'm good at, but also stuff that I'm not good at that I want to take a shot at. Like, I'm totally down for that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially if it involves a particular blue robot from an indie comic that people may or may not be familiar with on this channel.
No, I'm excited about that because the program I use, it lends itself very, very, very well to mechanical shapes and colors. So I'm very excited about getting to use the gradient tool on on a certain blue robot.
Cool. It's very funny because it seems like a lot of artists, whenever they tackle my character, they always say, "Oh, this is my first time doing this insert technique here." So I was like, "Oh, cool." So I guess Dracozoid, it's like the perfect character for people to just test new stuff on, which I'm very happy for to give him that chance.
There's definitely going to be some experimentation, but I've done enough mecha kaiju to know that most of it I don't like, but with him, he's more human. You know, he's a lot like Mogera. Drawing Mogera took me like days and days because it's just so, you know, non-organic looking, where Draco is more human looking, almost like an ultra hero.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit more fun, and he looks almost like some of the you know, like the drawing references that we use as artists, like the mannequins that have like the joints, like a revolver, or like a figure arts or something. Like, it looks very much like that. I love drawing stuff like that.
Funny enough, I intentionally designed him to be as easy to draw for other artists as possible.
No, mission accomplished, man.
Yeah, something that's like very easy, something easy to replicate, something that just simple enough to also stick in your mind. That sort of mentality I was going for, as well as just sort of taking inspiration from the general aesthetic of old school super robots, like Mazinger Z, Getter-Robo, Gai-King, the whole Shogun Warriors Force 5 sort of deal.
Oh yeah, no, you totally nailed it. You definitely nailed it with that stuff.
Thank you. That does remind me, since you brought up Mogera, what have been some of the most difficult or most time-consuming characters that you have drawn so far?
Oh, that's easy. Mechagodzilla, King Ghidorah, Shin Godzilla, the final form.
Yeah.
What else? Godzilla goes pretty quick because I make custom brushes now that like Godzilla brushes. Yeah, definitely Mechagodzilla. That's why I only have, if you notice, I only have one Mechagodzilla. And like, I get close to wanting to do other ones, but I just stop myself. Like, I'd love to do Kiryu and the 74, but he's got so many rivets. Same thing with King Ghidorah. Like, I'm starting to laying out a Destroy All Monsters poster. It's something I've always kind of wanted to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, let me find the King Ghidorah that you kind of don't see all of him. You know, you see him, he's kind of obscure. Because it's going to be like, you know, I don't know, was it 12 kaiju in that movie or something?
Right, or something around that level. Any interest in doing, since you mentioned you were a big fan, any chances of doing a giant Robo pinup or poster?
I actually did a Ginrei. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there was a cosplayer that I follow, and she did a Ginrei.
Oh, you got to show me that.
It's I'll send it to you. It's on my social media somewhere.
Oh, awesome!
Awesome. Realistic looking Ginrei, but you know, it's not cartoony at all. But I'm doing a giant Robo collab with Jeff Zorno. Actually, he's drawing it out, and I'm supposed to finish it.
Oh yeah, I remember he did he showed off the sort of a digital sketch for that, and I was like, holy shit, Zorno's working on giant Robo.
Yeah, I would like to do a proper one eventually. That'd be a fun style to do.
Would you ever want to do like the anime version or like the tokusatsu version?
Oh, anime version, 100%.
Nice. Have you done a lot of stuff that isn't live action or tokusatsu related?
Just in the last year, I did like a Bruce Lee's Game of Death, Enter the Dragon,
Mm-hmm.
Mad Max Fury Road, Halloween, Aliens, Friday the 13th. I did that one, which was a lot of fun. That's it so far, and that was all within like the last 6 months. Because I love drawing kaiju stuff, but I really want to stretch my legs more with non-kaiju stuff just to get more experience.
Oh yeah, definitely. You definitely don't want to just want to like be able to just do one thing. You want to be able to like kind of expand. I understand the need to expand your reach and becoming more versatile, and that's great.
Yeah, so I think after I do Ultraman, I'm going to do your piece, obviously, but I want to do like Big Trouble in Little China. I want to do The Thing, maybe, just stuff that's not normally in my wheelhouse. I when I draw monsters so much, I kind of miss drawing people because that's how I started, was drawing humans. So I kind of like go back and forth just to give myself like a refresher and a breather a little bit. Just so, like, I drew Godzilla so much that, like, I don't even want to draw him for a long time.
It's like that character from King Kong versus Godzilla. He's like, no more! I am sick of Godzilla! Yeah.
Pretty much. No, pretty much. I definitely hit, like, a burnout with him. And I was like, I need a break. And then I kind of have to, like, step away from him for a little bit, do something else until I start missing him again. And then I'll go back and draw him. And I'll get, like, 9 million likes on Instagram for anything Godzilla related that I post.
It's like, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much how it goes.
And I guess, like, since we talked so much about Godzilla, I'm very curious to know how you ended up becoming a fan in the first place with Godzilla, and what has been like your personal history with the franchise.
It just in New York, it always just Godzilla films just came on TV. We were lucky. So I have memories of watching Ghidorah, and Monster Zero was a big one. And then we had something called the Godzilla-thon, which came on, and it was just like a block of Godzilla movies. And my mom would tape them, and I would just watch them over and over. And she would tape them, and I'd watch them on VHS. And then I remember watching Atragon, Gargantuas, Frankenstein, The Mysterians. I remember I rented that. I rented Rodan, Mothra. At a local video store had all of these movies to rent too.
Wow!
And I remember renting The Mysterians when I was like 10, and I'm like, this movie's incredible. And I remember hearing about Battle in Outer Space, but I could never find it. But I found Gorith, and that was one of my favorites as a kid. Was Gorith, like renting that movie? Like I remember the VHS cover, and I remember when Blockbuster Video opened, and I rented all the Sandy Frank Gamera movies. So that's, I just pursued it when I was a really young kid, and I just happened to have this awesome video store in a local supermarket that had all of these movies. So I just bombarded myself with them at a young age, and it just sort of stuck into my older age. And here we are talking about me drawing them.
Yeah. And did you ever had any particular favorites among all those films that you grew up with?
Oh, of course, Monster Zero, Godzilla's Revenge to a certain extent, mostly because of that intro. The original Rodan, Mysterians. 54, I didn't really come to appreciate until I finally saw the subtitle version. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Mothra vs. Godzilla, which is an all-time favorite, Terra Mechagodzilla, Ghidorah. Those are like my top Showa era films. And I remember when the Heisei films were coming out, I was like 11 or 12. So I'd see them come out and I'd get like the bootlegs. But my favorite all-time kaiju film is Gamera 2. That's
that's huge, like action fest there.
Yeah, because I was when I was a teenager, I was getting more into like Hong Kong action films, like John Woo and Chow Yun-fat. And I was sort of losing interest because the Heisei era just ended. And I wasn't a huge fan of the Heisei films. The Godzilla designs were incredible. Like the 89 and 91 are like my favorite. And Destroyer was cool, but I was like, all right, those movies are okay, but they didn't really advance anything like I thought they would, being like modern film at the time. And a friend of mine was like, you need to see the Gamera trilogy. And I said, no, I can't get into Gamera. That's too much. he's like, no, you need to go watch it. So I remember I was sort of out of kaiju stuff, and I went to Chinatown in Manhattan, and I found a bootleg of Attack of Legion, and I watched it, and I remember tearing up at the part where Gamera breaks out of his coma, and he flies in front of Legion, and he starts sliding across the cityscape. And I just remember, like, my mouth was wide open. I had tears in my eyes. I'm like, what is this? This is incredible. This is amazing. And that sort of got me back into kaiju films again. And then, of course, I watched part 1, which is incredible. And then part 3 is like a masterpiece, even though part 2 is my favorite. But Nick Shev always makes fun of me because I always tell him that Gamera 2 is like the greatest kaiju movie. He's like, it's not, but it's really good. And he's always like, but no, that's the movie. Like, for me, that's what got me into really loving it. And when I was that came out, and I went to college and art school, and I worked in a toy store. So I would buy these little, like, I'd bring home these little, like, plastic houses and cars, and I would set up these dioramas in my garage of, like, Gamera in the background and the buildings in the foreground, and I would paint them. That's like art school project. Well, I was like really into that stuff, like making little dioramas and painting from them, like the old school guys used to do.
Oh, very cool. Did that ever like bring a lot of attention? Because I can only wonder just how many people were doing stuff like you did back then in school. I
mean, I look back at my art school stuff, and it was a little weak. I kind of wish I put more effort into it. I don't know. I was just young and dumb and into girls, and I kind of wish I put more effort into that stuff. But
I was going to say, aren't we all?
Yeah. I was always very serious and motivated in art school, but I think some of my figure stuff, my human stuff was stronger because there wasn't a lot of, I didn't have a lot of good reference for the kaiju stuff. It was just like a photo I found in GFan or some website or something, like Temple of Gamera or whatever it was. But yeah, I mean, everyone knew I was like a nerd. There was no question about that. But I didn't wear it. I just didn't wear it on my sleeve then like I do now.
I was just gonna say, like, so like you pretty much had like the reputation of being like the Godzilla guy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Cool.
Pretty much.
And have there been like other franchises, I guess like other Japanese or tokusatsu franchises that you've gotten into since your Godzilla Gamera days?
Not really. I mean, just the Toho stuff. Just no, not really. I mean, the Ultra series, obviously. I remember when I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 2006. Like, I grew up with Ultraman Towards the Future, and I saw.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was my first experience. Like, wow, this is cool, and I had all the toys.
Did you watch? Sorry, did you watch Towards the Future on television, like on Fox Kids?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I watched it live every Saturday whenever it came on. And I'd watch the random Ultra 7 episode at 2 a.m. on TNT. And it wasn't until I got the Ultraman box set in 2006. I watched it straight through. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I got Ultra 7, and I was like, oh my God, Ultra 7 is amazing. And then I started watching Mebius and Max. They became favorites. And then once I discovered Gaia, it just blew my mind. Gaia and Nexus are like unbelievably amazing. And to this day are like my favorite. I think 7, Gaia, and Nexus are like my 3 favorite Ultra shows, followed by like Max and Mebius.
Mebius is definitely one of my personal favorites for me. And I've heard so much about Nexus by my friends over the years. I've really been meaning to check that one out. The only problem is like with these shows spanning like, what is it, 30 to 50 episodes, it can be difficult trying to find the time to sit down and watch all of those.
Ultraman Tiga kind of was like the last long Ultra series I powered through. It was just like 52 episodes, and I was like, I'm good. Like,
I was actually going to ask you, did you ever watch Tiga during that brief period when it was on Saturday mornings around like 2004?
I knew of it, but I never watched it.
Okay, because that was sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I knew of it, but I sort of missed it when it was on, so I didn't really get into that at all, actually.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say that was my personal introduction, although maybe I have like very vague memories of watching Towards the Future, but I would say like Tiga back when it was on the, I guess back when Fox Kids transitioned into the Fox box. Tiga was one of the very first programs of the rebranded Saturday morning block, and I guess I would say that was my proper first introduction to Ultraman. And I just remember at the time already being a Power Rangers fan that I thought to myself, oh, wow, this is like Power Rangers, but slightly different. And it's like, I like Power Rangers, so I'm definitely digging this.
Yeah, and I watched Power Rangers too, mostly because I had a crush on Kimberly. But I knew what it was. Like I knew what it was based on. Like I knew all that stuff going into it. So
you were definitely a smarter kid than me, because I was convinced it was all American made until like years later.
No, they did a good job, but I used to go and buy those all the Godzilla Bandai toys at a local comic shop back in the 90s when they were all coming out, and it would have all those like Hobby Japan books, and I would just thumb through them, and so I knew all of like the Super Sentai series. I just know what it was.
Okay.
So like I knew about Jetman and Five Man and Jack Q, and I knew about them. I just didn't have any resources unless like I bought one of those like Asian fantasy film journals or any of those Japanese American fanzines where I kind of like discovered a lot of that stuff. So I was always into it. I just didn't have all the details of what it was.
Right. Basically. Yeah, because it was definitely kind of like the Wild West back in the day, where it's like your only means of getting any sort of information on this type of content was like you need to know someone who had access to like either a fan subbed bootleg VHS recording off someone who had a Japanese channel that had access to all this kind of stuff, or as you mentioned, those like fanzines or that focus on that type of material, which I guess wasn't really as common back in the day.
Right. Or like my wife's brother, he was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and he loves Mazinger and a lot of the Ultra shows because he said in Puerto Rico they come on TV all the time, whereas up here they didn't really come on at all. Right.
So, yeah, I've heard the same thing about this type of program in Mexico as well.
Yeah, Mexico's another one. Hawaii, like they got all the Ultra shows.
Right. They had like Ultraman, Ultra 7, Kikaider, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so they have like that familiarity with the characters that we don't over here in the States. Well, not yet anyway. That's changing.
Right, yeah, that's true. And I am very curious to know like your thoughts on like the recent Godzilla films, like from 2014 to the present day.
They're basically big budget remakes of the Gamera trilogy, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the design. I'm not a fan of the movies. There's parts of the movies I really, really like, but I could also say that about like Showa era films. Like they have their good points and they have their bad points, and it's just unfortunate that the legendary films have more bad than good for me to really like. And I just look at it as, I was a fan of Godzilla growing up, of a certain time period. Certain films, even going into the Millennium era, and I think these films are just made for young kids, newer fans, and that's fine. It's not my Godzilla, but it's going to be someone else's Godzilla, and chances are, if they get into that Godzilla, they're going to want to look up other movies, and they're going to discover the Showa era and the Heisei era, and I've seen it 9 times out of 10 when I do conventions, and people say, I saw the Godzilla, my kid saw the Godzilla 14 movie, and now he's obsessed. Now he's watching all the Godzilla movies, and he knows all their names, and it happens at every show. So it's great promotion in my eyes. Like, I'm not a fan, but it's doing something good, and it's helping me also with people being more familiar with what I do and the character and stuff like that. So that's kind of my very diplomatic. Yeah, no, my very diplomatic opinion of the new films.
Yeah. I definitely makes sense, and yeah, totally cool. It's definitely the way I guess I personally see the MonsterVerse films is that they're definitely trying to emulate the style of current trends in terms of modern day blockbusters, I feel. And especially with King of the Monsters. King of the Monsters definitely gave off very strong sort of MCU vibes. And I can definitely see people enjoying these type of aspects, and for other people, no. It's, at the end of the day, I see it as it's all subjective. And, it may not work for other, like you said, it may not work for some people, but for others, it can totally be right up their alley. So,
right.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me that there are people who may or may not enjoy these films.
Yeah, and that's really fun.
Yeah, and that's also the case, I feel, with Shin Godzilla as well, because I know a lot of people I feel like a lot of people definitely have very strong opinions one way or the other with the various MonsterVerse films. So with Shin Godzilla, I find Shin Godzilla to have a very unique style that's like perhaps has like the biggest contrast of fans and detractors alike. I'm very curious to know, what are your thoughts on that film in particular?
When I saw it for the first time, I saw it in the theater twice.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time when it ended, me and my buddy were like, just sat there like, wow, that was something. And the theater was dead silent.
Mm-hmm.
The Godzilla movies like debut on the big screen over here in New York. It was weird. Like I'm not a big fan of Shin Godzilla's design,
mm-hmm.
But it was definitely creepy seeing how it mutates and how powerful it was getting. When I saw it the second time, I saw it in a packed theater with a ton of Godzilla fans, and my brother, who's a casual Godzilla fan,
mm-hmm.
and his take on it was like, he's like, that was like the best Godzilla movie ever made from Japan because it looked really good and it was very realistic. And when I look at it at that perspective, I like it a lot. I think it's very, very, very well done. The directing is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like it as a one-off. I wouldn't want to see it as a series, and that's kind of where I stand on it. The military scenes, which were always my favorite as a kid,
mm-hmm.
were absolutely incredible in that movie. I wish Godzilla moved a little bit more,
mm-hmm.
but I think the ending, when they cue the Battle in Outer Space music,
mm-hmm.
I think that the ending was very much in the spirit of Honda's early films, especially like Honda's space trilogy films, where people unite for like a greater good. Like it very much reminded me of that, and I really like I really do enjoy the ending of Shin Godzilla. It had like a very Showa type of feel to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely get those vibes as well. Like with Hideaki Anno, he's definitely had like shown his love for tokusatsu with his like old student project films, with his old like Return of Ultraman fan film and that, what was it called, Dai Nippon Sentai parody. And he definitely is someone who I felt like was someone who wanted to tackle Godzilla by replicating a lot of what made classic Godzilla the way it was, while also putting a very unique spin in terms of essentially turning Godzilla into a very dry political drama sort of deal. And that's what I find so fascinating about Shin Godzilla, because when I saw the movie in 2016 in the theater, in Japanese theaters, it was like maybe a couple months after I moved to Japan. I knew immediately, I thought to myself, this is definitely gonna be divide people with its approach to storytelling, characterization, world building, all that kind of stuff. It's like Anno, I would say he's a very talented director, and so I would think like, okay, he knows what he is doing. He knows he's intentionally changing things up dramatically. And so I'm always curious. I'm always interested in hearing other people's thoughts, opinions, reactions towards the film, because much like with his previous work, his most popular work, Evangelion, there's definitely like a wide array of various differing opinions, and hearing so many people's different interpretations of the film is something that I'm always curious to learn about. Yeah,
no, like I said, I definitely like it, but I'm okay with it not having sequels.
Right. And speaking of something that did had sequels, did you ever watch the anime trilogy?
I watched the first one, and that's all I needed to see, and I never finished them. I refused. I remember watching the first one and rolling my eyes and huffing and puffing and just being like,
Yeah.
"What is this? You're wasting my all that time back. I could have been drawing or doing."
I take it we won't ever see a Godzilla anime trilogy piece from you in the future.
No, only if somebody wanted to commission me. Maybe, but no, absolutely not.
Imagine, I'm going to specifically commission you to do anime Ghidorah so that I can force you to watch and look for a decent screenshot of that.
Hey, if the money's good enough, I'll do it.
But yeah, you're not missing anything at all, especially the second movie, which is just a straight up like rehash of the entire plot of the first movie. And then for the third movie, all you got to do is essentially stare at that poster for like 30 minutes, and that's like a good chunk of what happens on screen.
Yeah, see, so I have no reason to even watch any of those movies.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I just remembered. When I got out of the theater from watching the second anime movie, I gave my opinions online on Facebook, and I think you were one of the first people who replied, and I essentially mentioned that like, with Mechagodzilla, you like to quote Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
I kind of remember that conversation because I remember we were talking about it, like a bunch of my Godzilla art friends, all of us, like Nick Shev and Gino and all these guys, and and I remember like I was like, oh wait, I know someone in Japan who just saw it, like this friend Andre, and I remember you were posting about it, and I was like, so what'd you think? And you were telling me, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah. It's like there is no Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, I remember reading that, and I was like, that's all I needed to see, because like I know you're a real fan and you have a brain, and you're very subjective, like you objective, where you just because it's Godzilla doesn't mean you're gonna love it.
Right.
You're like, someone shared the Godzilla vs. Kong movie in a Facebook group that I'm in. And, I was like, sort of like, oh, I can't wait to not like this movie. And a bunch of us were like being real neckheads about it. And one guy was like, I don't get it. He's like, it's two monsters beating each other up. Like, come on, it's a Godzilla movie. Like, what are you being so negative? He was like telling us to like just suck it up because it's got monsters in it.
Yeah.
And I said something like, hey, I can give you the long answer, but really quick, are you a fan of Star Wars? And if so, are you a fan of the new trilogy of films? And he replied, but he deleted it. He said, actually, yeah. He started talking about the new films and how like they made Rey a Mary Sue. And a friend of mine, my friend Mike, was like, so you're asking a bunch of Godzilla fans to accept what it is as you drop the word Mary Sue for Star Wars and expect us to like accept it, something like that. And the guy like deleted his comment, and he's like, yeah. He's like, that's very true. He's like, damn. I totally just schooled him. It's like, you're asking us to just accept it because it's two big monsters punching each other, but yet you're upset with Star Wars because they ruined your precious franchise. Like, so don't tell us to like, just accept it because it's monsters when you can't even accept your own pop culture phenomenon of a film series, you know?
Totally makes sense. Yeah, you don't have to, it's okay not to like everything of a particular franchise. You can be, in fact, I would say like being a fan of it allows you to be more critical of the thing that you like. Because you like it so much, you're willing to look at it deeper and see the positives and negatives in a more clearer way than anyone who just casually looks at it and goes, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. And I think the best new thing to come out, in my opinion, has been the Japanese Ultraman manga and the Netflix anime show. Like, I love it. I think it's like the best like reboot, reimagination of like one of the beloved tokusatsu properties that I've seen.
Oh yeah,
and I think and you can do a lot more, I think, with Ultraman than with Godzilla, because the Godzilla's role has changed over time. But like my
Mm-hmm.
favorite Godzilla will always be like mankind's punishment, nuclear nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like Justice Godzilla, some people like Daddy Godzilla, Heisei, but Ultraman is really good for reimagining certain concepts.
Oh
So
yeah,
that's been like your thing.
definitely, totally, yeah. And I agree. I'm definitely I was a big fan of the manga, and from what the few volumes that I've read, and from the first season of the anime. I am
Right.
aware that they apparently made some changes in the story of the first season compared to the manga. But overall, I definitely enjoyed both products. And while it definitely goes in a more henshin hero, metal hero type of vibe, it still,
Right.
to me, comes off as a genuine Ultraman product, a genuine Ultraman story coming from a new direction that's familiar and new at the same time. Uh,
Right. Right.
the funny thing is with the Ultraman manga and anime is that like once the anime came out, a lot of people were upset that it's not a giant hero series like Gridman was, and
Right.
I was asking my friend Dylan, it was like, did people not know this was based on a manga that's been out for several years now? I mean, did people just not know going in that he's not a giant?
Yeah. Yeah. I think people didn't know. They just saw the Netflix show and said, "Oh, cool! Like, how come he's small? This is weird." But the manga is really good, and I think it's better
Yeah.
than the anime. But still, the anime is very good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think a lot of people were familiar with it at all, and it
Mm-hmm.
definitely caught them by surprise.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Speaking of anime, did you ever get around? Have you gotten the chance to watch Gridman? SSSS.Gridman?
No, not yet, not yet. But it's on my list of things to watch.
Okay, I highly recommend the series, and
Yeah,
it's pretty much like what a lot of people say. It's pretty much the show that people wish the Godzilla trilogy was, and to quote my friend Dylan in our review of the series, it definitely came out at the right time. Like for those
right,
people who were like looking for more traditional tokusatsu translated into anime in the wake of the
right.
trilogy and Ultraman anime, it definitely came out at the right place and time for that.
Yeah, I've heard that. But I do want to say that I do have to start wrapping it up in a little
Ah,
bit,
yes,
and
okay.
I definitely want to do this again because it's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
were there any other things you wanted to sort of touch upon before
Mhm.
we call it a night, or do you want to save it for the next one?
I guess like the very last topic I wanted to bring up, and that was given that like you and I have been participants of G Fest's Artist Alley,
Right,
I've definitely been very interested in discussing the topic of the Artist Alley, given our, I guess you and I have had, I've only been a participant of Artist Alley, an Artist Alley vendor or a member for just of 2019, but I have been a very big fan ever since I started attending G Fest in 2014 of the Artist
right,
Alley and its amazing community of extremely wonderful, talented, overall awesome people. And I've noticed that
right,
over the years, Artist Alley only seems to be given less attention over the years, and
right,
actually being able to partake in and becoming a part of the Artist Alley through my Draco Azul comic, I was able to see
right,
firsthand what it was like to be an artist in this room. And like for me, I've only ever had experiences with two conventions, that being San Diego Comic-Con and G-Fest. And G-Fest 2019 was like the one time I was in a participant of Artist Alley. And with you
right.
being someone who has had a lot of experience at various conventions, I'm very curious to know, what is your opinion on how Artist Alley is run in comparison to the Artist Alley of other conventions? And do you, like me, do you also think that it could use some improvements in terms of like location, promotion, all that stuff?
Um, yes, I do. my experience with it has been, it started out positive in 2015. It's grown more and more negative every single year. Some of it is, had nothing to do with G-Fest, but the hotel. And some of it had to do with how G-Fest is run and who runs it. And every year there seems to be some sort of drama that comes out of nowhere. It usually comes around this time of year. For some reason, around this time of year. G-Fest started as a small show run by friends and volunteers. So nobody really gets paid. It's a labor of love. But when you start doing other conventions that are run by corporate entities, it's run a lot better because they're paying people. So right off the bat, you're going to have better service at, let's say, New York Comic Con than you are going to have at G-Fest. Now, if I did G-Fest, I would just think this is normal, but I don't do G-Fest. So it's sort of like an abnormal thing to me that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. And I think G-Fest in general has grown more and more every year. And I think the show is trying really hard to hold on to its past and how it's always been run, while also coming to terms with social media and cancel culture and a youth movement that has sort of come into its own in G-Fest. I see it every year, that it gets younger and younger, which is great because that means it's going to be G-Fest from now until the end of time. But I think the powers that be don't have an easy way to, they're very obtuse in their thinking and how they handle things and how they talk to people. And unfortunately, the way G-Fest is run is they're not open to opinions or interpretations or suggestions. It's just how they say, and it's how it goes. And if it wasn't for the friends I made there, like people like yourself and all my good artist buddies that I love, that have become like a family, I probably wouldn't do the show. And all of us that do G-Fest, whether we go as an attendee or an artist or a vendor, we go because we love it. And all we want the show to do is to just get better and better, like every other show does. I've seen shows start off in basements and have turned into massive events like New York Comic Con. And anytime I've ever been critical of G-Fest, it comes from a place of love and a desire to see it grow and become something that it's, there was that one year where they had that great, that kaiju auction in one of the rooms in the basement. And they hired, the people that ran the auction hired the famous illustrator, Tom Whalen, to do this great poster, book cover. So they had this like great banner with this great professional artist, and it didn't look like it belonged in G-Fest, which is sad because it was next to something that was handwritten on a piece of Xerox paper in a black Sharpie, and the letters were like squeezed into the edge of the page because they didn't measure out like how big to write this, Artist Alley is this way or whatever, and it looked really embarrassing. And it just spoke to how G-Fest approaches things, where I understand they can't tape stuff to walls, they can't do certain things, and when they do, it just looks really half-assed and flea market-like. So it hurts the way to see them constantly shoot themselves in the foot. And being an Artist Alley, like now we're going into a new hotel, if there is a G-Fest this year, hopefully next year. But it's just run really poorly. Not because of the guy who runs Artist Alley, because he's a really nice guy. It's just how they treat artists in general and how they don't recognize. G-Fest is basically a toy show with Japanese guests. And a few others. That's how they look at it. That's
definitely been like it's apparent. I guess to me, it's always felt like that was always the biggest priority. The dealer's room where they sell a lot of the merch, where the vendors sell a lot of merch. And the Japanese guests, where that's within, like, for those who don't know, the sort of layout of the hotel, where it's the old hotel where it took place up until now. There's one single hallway with a series of ballrooms and a couple tables on the side, and that's where all like the biggest stuff takes place. Meanwhile, Artist Alley was initially, like, when you and I started going, was shoved over to the opposite end of the hotel in a restaurant. sans all the kitchen stuff and the table. We essentially, it's a literal restaurant, but since the restaurant went under new management, Artist Alley was shoved into a tiny room in the basement floor. Right. And I feel like not last year. Now I got to think 2 years now, and that it's 2021. 2 years ago, I was pretty grateful for the amount of traffic we still got in the basement. But I feel like had it been in a proper room upstairs on the ground floor, the literal ground floor, it would have been the attendance or a lot of attention towards the Artist Alley would have been perhaps like increased like tenfold, perhaps.
Right.
But I guess like despite Artist Alley always being a staple of the convention scene, it never really felt like it was a priority. From my own experiences, I definitely agree with you with everything you said there. That like the convention really needs to, if the convention really wants to thrive, I think the best way is to adapt with the times and to grow alongside in quality alongside the growth in attendance. And so, hopefully this new hotel could provide a new change of pace and like a fresh start. And that's just that's my hopeful thinking right there.
I hope so too. It's just, unfortunately, it's still run by the same people, so it's almost like putting perfume on a pig, in my opinion. I think the people who run the show need to sell it to like some sort of corporate entity, and it who knows? It could probably get big. I don't know if it'll get as big as, say, something like C2E2, but it could possibly get to maybe like of the quarter of the size of Star Wars Celebration, and they could make it like an event. But
or heck, like do follow something like maybe they could take cues from something like Power Morphicon or Japan World Heroes.
Yeah, just something, or like, I know they've done like a little kaiju cons out in the West Coast that have been really successful. They just need to just sort of adapt with the times. It's the best way to put it is that if you've seen, I'm sure you've seen the movie The Dark Knight.
Yes.
But the Joker says to Batman, this is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Batman is definitely G-Fest and the Joker is the fandom. And the change times, and they just refuse to budge, and it gets really frustrating to deal with personality types that just don't want to hear anything. And it's like,
I feel like the kind of people who like refuse to accept any kind of criticism, those are definitely the most problematic.
And unfortunately, they like to silence people on social media. They don't want to hear anything. And you know what, I do a very profitable anime convention called Anime NYC in Manhattan. And the only reason why I did that was because I was invited back to my old art school to give a talk to some kids. And they wanted to know like what I did. And I said, this is what I do. I do scenic painting during the day, and I draw Godzilla at night. And they said, you should do this anime show. You would do really well there. And I said, no, I never heard good things about anime shows. And they said, no, Artist Alley was packed and people were buying art there. And I was like, and they said, you'd be the only kaiju artist. So I said, let me give it a shot. And I did phenomenal there. And then I did it the next year and did even better. And I made more money there than I did at G-Fest, which is crazy. And it was in my own backyard. I didn't have to fly there. Run very, very well, like incredibly well organized, and how considerate they are. And it's like, that's how you do a show. And I basically listened to these kids, and they were right. They were 100% right, because they have their finger on the pulse. And if G-Fest just listened to some people and opened up a little bit more, I mean, God. And I think that's what gets me so frustrated with them. It's just how stodgy and stagnant the show is. It's been the same show since the 90s, It's like, come on.
Yeah. What worked in the 90s clearly doesn't work these days.
No, like you're not going to be listening to grunge and wearing plaid and long hair. It's not going to work, man.
I'm sure the owner would love to do that, to keep on doing that.
But he'd be the only one that looks like that. Unfortunately, that's what the show looks like.
Yeah. So I guess to sort of wrap things up,
Yeah.
For those out there that wish to get into art or would love to get into the sort of entertainment industry as an artist, whether it's freelance or anything of that nature, is there any advice you would like to give to people interested in getting into the art scene?
Yeah, just do it. Do it because you love it, and research the industry that you want to get into, and research the people that you can reach out to. There's plenty of websites, plenty of resources now on Google to find information. Look at art schools. Definitely go to an art school, because even if you're like phenomenally talented, art school will give you the connections you need to make it out there in the world of art. Because when you graduate, like let's say your buddy gets a really good job at Marvel Comics and you want to be a comic artist, and guess what? If they need a cover artist, he might recommend you because he knows you and he knows that you're a hard worker and you're diligent. And bottom line is you got to have a really good work ethic, and you have to want it more than anything else. And it has to be the most important thing in your life. Aside from family and your relationships, it has to be something you're serious about. Creative people are rare, and the powers that be know that, and they take advantage of creative people too. So that's another thing you have to be aware of, and they will push you to your limits in terms of delivering for them. So whatever you research, just look at everything. Look at the working conditions, the pay, how long careers last in certain fields, what kind of hours they work, or are they working 20-hour days and weekends? Is that something you want? Do you want to be married with a family going into that field? These are just things you have to really think about. But the bottom line is that art is who you are. It's not a career sometimes, actually all the time. It's who you are. And as long as you're creating, you're an artist. As long as you're doing your work, you're an artist, whether you're making your living from it or not. And that's the most important thing, is to never stop doing it. Just always do it. Always make time for it, because you will regret it if you don't. I guarantee that. Especially if you have any sort of talent or any sort of desire to do it. If you don't do it, you'll feel it, and you'll feel miserable. And you won't know why you're miserable until you pick up a pencil or an iPad and start drawing, and you'll realize, I feel good. This is what I needed to do a long time ago. So that's really the best advice I can give to people.
Thank you very much, man. And thank you once again for your valuable time. It's been an absolute pleasure finally getting the chance to sit down and chat with you for these almost last 2 hours. And it's honestly, it's people like you that are why I keep coming back to G-Fest, and being able to hang out. And when I first came to G-Fest and saw the amazing people at Artist Alley, it was definitely a very inspirational seeing all of you guys with your works of art and passion projects, and it really truly was inspiring for me. And I hope nothing but the best for you especially, and I can't wait to see what sort of work that you'll be making in the future.
Thank you. It's everything you just said right back at you.
Thank you very much.
No, it's been a pleasure. It really has. I would definitely love to do this again. Maybe we could do like a Godzilla retrospective or something, or maybe when Godzilla vs. Kong comes out and we want to do a review or something.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Right. I'll definitely hold you to that when the time comes.
Awesome, man.
So, where can people find you, and if they wish to follow you in your body of work?
My website is www.robo7.com. That's ROBO7.com. If you go into contact, you'll see all my social media. If you just want to go right to Instagram, I'm just at Robo7, and that's ROBOSEVEN. And Facebook, Robo7, The Art of John Bellotti Jr. And I'm on Twitter as Bellotti_John. But Instagram is the big one. You can find me very easily on Instagram. Just Robo7.
Excellent. I'll be sure to have all the links in the description of the video below. So thank you very much again, John, and hope everyone enjoyed this latest edition of the Shuwatch podcast. So, as always, ladies and gentlemen, I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiji Noir.
And I'm John Bellotti Jr., aka Robo7.
And until next time, everybody, take care.
See ya.